Hi, and welcome to the And1 Podcast. I'm your host, Alex West, and this is the first 2017-2018 regular season edition of the podcast, so it is hot off the presses. I'm joined today by Andrew Johnson, the Celtics outsider, and we talk a little bit of everything. We talk about the two games this evening, and then we go into the teams that we're really interested in because there are a ton of good storylines. Make sure you're following the podcast at And1 Analytics, and make sure you're following me on Twitter, at AlexWestNBA. My Twitter handle has changed. Decided to update it for the times, so it is AlexWestNBA on Twitter. Make sure to follow that and give this podcast a listen. I really enjoyed doing it. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Brent, take us away. Joined by my guest today, Andrew Johnson, the Celtics outsider. Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great on the eve of America's greatest holiday, NBA opening night.
I'm so pumped. And that's basically all we're going to talk about today. We didn't really do an extensive layout or anything. We're just excited that today is the day that the most tumultuous offseason in NBA history has ended, and we're going to talk about basketball. So it's as simple as that.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. So sit back, grab a tub of popcorn, enjoy the podcast, and then get ready to enjoy Celtics, Cavs, and Rockets, Warriors this evening.
Whew. What a night.
It's going to be a great night. So let's start out with this. Let's Celtics, Cavs. What is the most interesting storyline tonight? I mean, there are 75 great stories that are going on with this game, but what compels you the most to watch?
Goosebumps, choose your scare, except choose your most compelling story, I guess. It's like, is it the drama with Kyrie coming back? Is Cleveland going to embrace him, or are they going to boo him, throw batteries like they threw at LeBron when he came back? Just the Celtics team coming together, Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving, and Al Horford, three phenomenal NBA basketball players on the same team with Brad Stevens. I don't know. The more I think about it, the less clear my brain becomes, and I just get this weird heavenly state, and I'm just like, basketball. That's kind of just what's happening. I'm too excited.
No. You should be excited because that's what it's going to be this evening. I don't know that I'm going to be able to focus on any one thing. I think the thing that probably saddens me the most is that we're not getting the Kyrie coming back to Cleveland game and the Isaiah Thomas facing the Celtics game in the same game. And that's a little bit of a letdown because Isaiah, based on his quotes and the things he said about Danny Ainge, how you just don't do that, man, there's a little bit of animosity towards Danny Ainge, and obviously he still loves Jaylen Brown, he still loves Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, all these guys that he played with when he was in Boston, but boy, I think there's going to be something to prove the first time the Celtics square off against the Cavaliers and Isaiah Thomas, and I'm a little let down by that, but there are so many good storylines that I think I'll live.
Yeah, you get the feeling if Isaiah was to see Danny in a back alley right now, it would not be a pretty sight for Danny.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a throwdown for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Isaiah's been saying he loves Celtics still, but if in a tight game, one that matters, at least in the regular season, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a bit of a fight this year.
Oh yeah. These two teams do not like each other. I mean, and that even goes back last season, even though the Celtics roster's remade, Jaylen Brown's still there. Jaylen can get a little chippy. Marcus Smart, we know, can get a little chippy. So
he's Mr. Chippy.com.
I don't know who he's most chippy with, though, with the not signing the extension yesterday. He might be more chippy with Danny Ainge, too. He might side with Isaiah when it comes to the fight.
Danny's not making any friends.
He's not making any friends. That's the truth. I'm really excited about this game. I think it's going to be the kickoff to LeBron's MVP season. I know people have been saying a lot of different things, like Kawhi's going to win it. I mean, and if the Spurs win 60, that's probably a plausible out, that people are going to think that that's going to happen. But I really think that LeBron is is aware of what his situation is against the Warriors, particularly if Isaiah doesn't come back, that this is probably not a team that's super competitive. And I say that I'm not trying to be a Kyrie homer, but I think the truth of the matter is that Kyrie, if he's not the most unguardable player in the NBA when he gets going, he's one of the most unguardable. And LeBron probably stakes his claim still as the most unguardable when he wants to be. Yeah. But without that creativity, without that ability to put 40 on you at any given night, I just feel like Cleveland takes a step back from their ability to snake a game from the Warriors, which turns into 2 games, which turns into 3 games, which turns into steal in a series. So I feel like I said that to say that this is a good season for LeBron to go after the MVP. I mean, he's building his resume as the GOAT. He's building his GOAT resume to square up with MJ. And I feel like this is a good chance for him to show that he's a 27-7 player every night of the week, and that's on a 54-55 win Cleveland team could be enough to get him the MVP.
Yeah, if LeBron wants to carry the Cleveland to the first seed, or really if they want to repeat their successes of last year, he does have to turn his game up. He's got to turn back the clock a bit, and yeah, like you're saying, if he's sitting down and being 100% realistic with himself, which, you know, as an athlete is very hard to do, the biggest goal he can probably achieve this year is the MVP. So it would not be a surprise to me to see him go all out. On some nights where maybe he would have rested before, he's going to come out and he's going to try to tear the rim off on someone's head.
Let's make about 80% of our listenership angry and talk about our expectations for Kyrie Irving for a second.
Let's do it.
I have very high expectations for Kyrie, and I know that's an unpopular opinion. I try to disassociate my Celtic fandom from this when I say it, but I feel like people won't let you do that. They'll say you're being a homer.
It's impossible.
Right. But so here's the thing. Kyrie Irving can play defense. On paper he's not a very good defender, but we've seen in stretches where he's a plausible defender against Steph Curry, against other good point guards. I think that there are a lot of things, a lot of factors that go into the Kyrie Irving camp this year that will make him come out as a better player. And I think one of them is he's going to give effort on defense, which is not something he's particularly done a tremendous amount of. But I think he has now to prove that he can defend at an NBA level. Because there's going to be so much scrutiny on his game that I think he has to prove he can defend at an NBA level. And I think that's one thing that's going to go into it. And then the other thing, and this is something you're going to be intimately familiar with watching the Celtics last year, Brad Stevens' offense gets scorers the ball so they can score. It's the one of, if not the best offensive setups in basketball, particularly on set plays in the half court. The ball goes where it needs to go because you've got guys like Hayward, Horford, Smart, who will get the ball where it needs to be, and they'll get Kyrie Irving where he needs to be. If they need him to come off screens, there's something they did with Isaiah a lot last year, and those two things make me believe that we're in for a really, really good Kyrie Irving season.
I'm right there with you. I think, what's the record on points plus assists in a game? Can we just double that for Kyrie at least once? No. No, but in seriousness, I think Kyrie is a perfect fit for this offense and for this team. And I think I've heard Brad mention it, and it makes a lot of sense to me that, you know, Kyrie, having spent so much time with LeBron, has kind of been forced into maybe growing up as a player a little differently than he would have if he had his own team. So he's actually pretty phenomenal off the ball. I don't have the stats on me right this second, but I do think he's up there percentage-wise in terms of offensive efficiency off the ball, and that's something Brad's got to be salivating at, because we have 3, maybe 4 players who are pretty decent to great playmakers in the starting 5 right now. It's exciting. It's an exciting time to be a Celtics fan, and honestly, it's an exciting time to be an NBA fan. I think the NBA is going to be well served by having a very thrilling Celtics team this year.
It will be interesting to see how the defense forms itself. I mean, obviously the loss of Crowder is going to be an impact on defense, but Jaylen Brown is in his second year now, and he was a player who played some capable defense at times last year, and a player who looked like he had a higher ceiling than what he had shown as a rookie. I think he's grown a lot, and I think that's going to be a big part of the Celtics defense.
Yeah, Crowder, he gets credit because he's really good. He's been great at defense. Last year, I thought he slipped a little bit. Not much, but at least, as a consistent shooter and as a consistent defender, like Crowder's your big three. He's the classic big three. But you don't really want him guarding 1 through 4. He's more of like some 2s, 3 and 4, maybe some 5s too, I guess. But Jaylen, I don't know if you saw. I'm sure you did see in the preseason. Did you see him lock down Kemba Walker? Like Crowder wasn't going to do that ever.
He's lengthy. Like I think that's a big deal. His length is going to give people problems. He's a pretty good shot blocker. He had a couple of really blocks that really intrigued me in terms of his defensive potential. Once when they were playing the Hornets, he got a block on Kemba, and then turned around and got a block on Marvin Williams in the same possession or the sequent possession, like the next possession. And that kind of defense where you're bothering people with length, and both times they weren't layups, they were jump shots that he blocked. And that's
he closed that gap real quick.
That quickness to me is really compelling because the Celtics lost 2 great defenders. They lost Jay Crowder and they also lost Avery Bradley.
Yep, no bones about it.
Right, and that's going to be a problem. But I also see the capability for a Jaylen Brown and a Marcus Smart to sort of fill those gaps in a way that's pretty conducive. And I'm gonna connect that saying I think the Celtics defense will be better, but it may not score. The teams may not score fewer points against them, but I think it'll be better because I think the Celtics offense is going to go up to another level from what it was last year. Just because you have Kyrie, but you also have Horford, but you also have Gordon Hayward, but you also have Jason Tatum, and those 4 guys are pretty polished scorers. Even though Tatum's 19. He has shown in his limited preseason and summer league action that he's polished. He can score. He's a good jump shooter. He knows where to be on the offensive end.
Got that old man's game.
He's got. Well, if the old man you're talking about is Paul Pierce. Did I lose you? No, there you are. Okay, but if the old man is Paul Pierce, then I agree with you that he has got the old man's game. But I think those 2 things, a little bit more effort out of Kyrie, some step-ups by Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, coupled with the fact that their offense is going to be a little bit more high-octane, it is going to lead you to believe that the Celtics are a comparable defensive team to last year's squad.
I'm there with you.
So that's enough about Boston because everybody's probably turned off. We're 12 minutes in, and they're probably just nah. These 2 guys are going to talk about the Celtics for a long time. Let's flip it over to the other side and talk about Cleveland. We talked a little bit about LeBron, but I think there are a lot of questions on this Cleveland roster. I don't love Derrick Rose and Dwayne Wade playing extended minutes together. I don't love. There are just a lot of things about this roster that I don't love. But one of the things that I do love is Kevin Love, and I think he's going to be a great center for them because I think he takes that ball movement that sort of Tristan Thompson's an okay passer, but Kevin Love is a tremendous passer. And then if you have LeBron and Love as your guys who are whipping the ball around, I think you're going to have a pretty frenetic offense that definitely shows some capability when it comes to scoring the basketball.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think a lot of people kind of forgot that Kevin Love used to be that dude in Minnesota, and it's sure, maybe most of that was because he had to shoulder the entire offensive burden. But regardless of points or whatever, Kevin is a transcendent passer as a big guy, and he's going to shine with increased usage, I would say. The offense for Cleveland is very interesting to me. I think they have a chance to be better offensively, or, different, maybe as good, but I don't know, maybe better for me. I would say they have a chance to be better. But I just don't know who they're going to guard, Alex. They have LeBron and like a host of skeletons.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Like the two things that I pull out, my big nitpicks with this team, like first of all, they might score 110 a night. Okay, so that's cool, that's fine.
Yeah.
But they don't have tremendous floor spacing in their starting five because Rose and Wade are limited shooters, and then we both know very well what Jay Crowder is capable of outside of the corner three. He's not bringing a ton to the table. So your floor spacers in your offense are also coupled with your ball movers in the offense in LeBron and Kevin Love. And that's your ability to space the floor, which I think is a problem. And then, like you said, come on. How are they going to defend teams with... How are they going to defend the Houston Rockets? How are they going to defend the Golden State Warriors? I mean, they better score 130 on those nights.
That's the best defense is a good offense, and they're going to need a phenomenal offense.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not in love with what they've got going right now, but I also trust LeBron to be able to... Mm-hmm. LeBron is so great that he sort of soothes over like these misgivings that you have because he can do so many things. If he needs to play center, he can play center. If he needs to be a rim protector, he can be a rim protector. And all of those things sort of alleviate a little bit of a few of the questions I have, but you know, like it becomes hard. I think this team reminds me of the 2010 Cavaliers, the last year he was in Cleveland, where
that's a good call.
They are very reliant on LeBron's skill set to cover all of their big holes. And at 33, 34 years old, that starts to be a little more worrisome than it was when he was 26 or 27.
He's already questionable with that ankle for game one.
Yeah, well, not if you ask J.R. Smith. J.R. Smith says he is in, baby.
Oh, he's in.
Oh, he's in, baby. And I think that's going to be a big deal. Like maybe what if his health is not 100%? What does this team become if it has to sit LeBron? Not 10 games in a row, but a couple of games in the first couple of weeks. What does this team become? Like now you're slipping into, instead of winning 56 or 57, now you're winning 52 or 53, and then it starts to snowball after a while, I think.
Yep. At a certain point, you start looking at it and like, well, are healthy Wizards just as good as this team? If this team doesn't reach its like 75th, 80th percentile? Like, I don't know. It's scary. And, if LeBron was anyone else, if LeBron was prime Carmelo, I think we would be talking about this team could be a train wreck this year. But LeBron is LeBron, so he's earned the respect and the right for everyone to be like, well, let's see how good LeBron can make these guys. Like, I don't think anyone's saying that the Cleveland Cavaliers aren't the best team in the East, and rightfully so. I mean, LeBron is LeBron, but there are cracks in the armor this year.
Yeah, certainly more so than there have been, and I think like people have sort of like soothed over the Kyrie trade and just been like, yeah, this is okay.
Like, oh yeah, it's Isaiah Thomas. It's the same player.
Right, but it's not the same player. Like, I love Isaiah, and I will always love Isaiah, but
King of the Fourth.
I would swap Isaiah for Kyrie 10 times out of 10 because there are so many little things that you can do to Isaiah to befuddle him and make his game a little bit more complicated, and that's a healthy Isaiah. He played so well. He played tremendously, particularly in the fourth quarter. But we saw it in the Bulls series and then a little bit in the Washington series, but they didn't really have the personnel, where they just sort of befuddled him and made him make weird decisions, and they'd blitz him off of pick and rolls and make him get rid of the ball. And there were these little things that happened that Kyrie Irving, things like don't happen to Kyrie Irving. Because he's such a tremendous ball handler and such a tremendous finisher around the rim. And I think those are going to be some really big issues for Cleveland to work through when it's something that people have sort of like, they've brushed over and said like, oh, it's the same player, like exactly like you said.
Yeah, it's like, it's no coincidence. Like Isaiah's been a very well-respected offensive player since he's got in the game, but it's no coincidence that he had his best year in his third year with Brad? Something along those lines? Third year with Brad Stevens, with an offense tailored solely around getting him the best possible looks. Like, if he gets those looks, he's going to knock him down. And the argument is, well, LeBron's going to give him so much space and so much room to work with. But you're relying on Tyronn Lue to draw up an offense that can take advantage of his skill sets, and I don't have that much confidence in Tyronn.
No, I tend to agree with you. It's scary to put your fate in the hands of a guy who really has not shown to me that he has as firm a grasp on the X's and O's as you'd like for a competitive team. And he's sort of more of a player's coach, and he works on his rotation, and he's sort of that Phil Jackson of like hands-off approach. Like this guy's going to go in with 8 minutes to go in the second, and this guy's going to go in. But beyond that, it doesn't look like there's a ton of X's and O's. And I think you make such a good point saying that Isaiah was reliant on Brad Stevens. Not reliant, but he was sort of dependent on Brad Stevens to.
It was a perfect symbiosis.
Yeah. That Brad had these X's and O abilities to get Isaiah the ball in the best spots for him, which is not something you've seen outside of LeBron in Cleveland from a coaching perspective.
Right.
So, I don't know. Like, what if you had to say right now, Cleveland's the best team in the Eastern Conference?
Yep, I think LeBron's earned that for sure. He could very well just have his best season ever this year, and it would surprise absolutely no one.
Okay, that's totally fair. I mean, I think I'll probably stick with you, even if I say I think Boston's probably the 1 seed, but I think if I had to pick right now, seeing sight unseen on development, I think Boston's probably like a 56 game winner. And I think Cleveland's probably like a 53 game winner, and guys can all mark the tape and remind me that I said this. I've done that a lot this week where people just mark the tape and you can remind me that I said this, but I think Cleveland's probably the better team in a 7-game series still because of LeBron. It begins and ends with LeBron.
He's just too valuable. Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on from Cleveland and Boston. Let's talk about the second game tonight. Let's talk about the Rockets and the Warriors for a minute. Big changes for the Rockets. I mean, we've been through this a million times. Everybody knows what happened with Houston this year, adding Chris Paul. How much do you believe in this experiment? Like, how much do you really think that adding Chris Paul to this Daryl Morey grand experiment moves the needle for Houston?
Well, as a fan and as a human being, I am absolutely fascinated by this. As like someone who, as also a fan and a human being, I don't know. I don't know if it does move the needle all that much. I can't base it off of. I can't base it off of anything I've seen last year, or really anything I've seen before in the NBA. It's just like, well, do you think these 3 players can play together well? Or not, and do you trust the coach, and do you trust Morey? It's just you gotta take a bit of a hope and a prayer to see have any confidence about what's going to happen this year.
I think that the big issue, or not the big issue, but I think the big success in all this is that you can never have, or you can imagine a scenario where you don't have any minutes that don't have either Chris Paul or James Harden. I said that in the most confusing way possible, but there at no time in the game is one of the Chris Paul James Harden duo not in the game, and I think that's a really big deal because it means you never lose your offensive flow. But I'm not sure how valuable Chris Paul is off ball at this point in his career, which means like you're in that situation where you're letting James Harden go off ball a little more. Which, if last year was any indication, with his 11 assists and 30 points a game, like he is a player who deserves to have the ball in his hand and is the most successful with the ball in his hand. I'm just not sure, and I'm sure they'll work it out, and I'm sure it's fine, but I'm not sure at the end of the day how much of a threat they really pose to the Warriors with this duo.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more like, I think if it does end up working, it'll be really amazing basketball to watch. And even if it doesn't, they're still going to be good. But like you said, like Chris Paul, I don't think he's ever played off the ball. I don't think, probably in his entire basketball career from like 5 years old to now. Like, you're not going to have Paul off the ball, so you're going to have Harden off the ball. So maybe that's not even the ideal use of resources. And then on top of that, Chris Paul, a very good defender in his years, but he's getting old too. Like, I don't know if they've got the defenders to make it too interesting with the Warriors. But their brand of basketball is going to be very pleasing if it works out. So I'm excited.
Yeah, this is the culmination of the Morey experiment and I think last year it was like the min-maxing of it, where it was like, we're not going to shoot any mid-range shots. We're going to maximize every possession. We're either going to shoot a layup or a three. And then this year's a little bit backed off of that, where it's like, okay, well, now we got Chris Paul. He's a capable player in the mid-range. He can do a lot of things for our offense. He can allow James to come off screens, which is something that James really didn't do. I mean, he shot the majority of his threes off the dribble last year. So I think that, if last year was the big test in terms of X's and O's, in terms of grand strategy, this is the culmination of the personnel. That with this group of people, this is as good a team as you can put together if this is the style of basketball you want to play. So, yeah, I tend to agree that it's going to be pretty pleasing to watch it, for better or for worse.
Yeah, it's like I think you said perfectly. The last year is like, does this work? They're like, oh, it works. Let's try to make it great, and it could. And it could be. They could end up posing a threat, but if they're going to pose a threat, it's because the modern offensive efficiency is better than the Warriors, and the Warriors are pretty modernly efficient as well. So I don't see it.
I think they have to hit 40% of their threes in 4 of the 7 games. Like, if they do that, and that's a big ask against a Warriors team that really defends the perimeter well. If they do that, then yeah, maybe they have a chance at it. But like. And we're talking about something that's 9 months down the road, and a 1-game sample size is not going to tell us anything tonight. But I think it's a bet that you want to make if you're Daryl Morey, because if you're looking at all the bets he could have made where he blows it up, or he builds young around James Harden, or he does any number of things, that when it comes to decision trees, the one that lands you Chris Paul is probably the one you follow. But
that's a good tree.
It's a good tree. But at the same time, it's not the tree that's probably going to guarantee you being competitive with the Warriors. It's just the best possible tree, I think. And I think that's the interesting mathematical model that Daryl Morey has created.
It is interesting, and like you said, like it may not be the most likely outcome, but you can see a way for them to do it, and that's more than you can say about almost any other NBA basketball team beating the Warriors in a 7-game series.
Well, let's talk about the other team that I think has a chance. I mean, obviously San Antonio. Nobody's talking about San Antonio. They're exactly where they want to be. But the other team that I think the most people would agree with could beat the Warriors is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They acquired Chris Paul. I mean, they acquired Paul George. They acquired Carmelo Anthony. And they've put together this roster that is centered around those 3 guys and their ability to score the basketball and to defend and to switch and all of the things that you want them to do. But how good is this team? And I think that's a question. I mean, I'm looking at my over-unders that I made this week, and I have them at 56, which I think is pretty good and probably good enough to put them into like the 3 or the 4 seed in the West. But I don't know how much. And a lot of people are saying they're the second best team in the West, which may well be true. But what is the gap between Oklahoma City and Golden State?
I think it's pretty wide. It's like, when I look at both of their rosters, you kind of squint and you see similar players in similar positions, except Golden State's, if not outright better at those positions, they fit together well and they play more defense. So it's like, I think the gap is pretty big, but it's not. I mean, if Olympics Carmelo comes around, if he's still alive, that tightens that gap. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that there is like. But like, did you ever want to put your championship hopes on if Carmelo Anthony is the best version of Carmelo Anthony?
No,
I
honestly.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think they're getting too much credit as a super team right now because Carmelo has a whole lot to prove for this to become even halfway of a thing.
I watched
a
game where they played Denver the other night, and this is obviously learning curve and like a whole bunch of other stuff, but there was almost a now you take a turn. You know, between Westbrook, George, and Anthony, there was almost okay, I'm going to give Paul the ball, and this is Paul's possession. All right, I'm going to give Carmelo the ball. Now this is Carmelo's possession. Now I'm going to take a possession. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like that to me is worrisome, and it worries me a little bit that you have three guys who have been so ball dominant playing together, and to find a balance that's going to work on offense and then still be able to switch on defense, and Carmelo's an atrocious defender, and all these questions, they start to add up for me to where I'm saying like what are we really looking at here? I mean, is this really a super team, or is this just a really good team that's going to be reliant on Russell Westbrook and Paul George, who were tremendous players, and then in a very effective scorer in Carmelo Anthony, who's probably not a tremendous player anymore, but still a really good one.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. It's like Frankenstein's monster of a basketball team, and all of the naysayers about usually, when the Celtics originally put together their second big three, like people are like, well, how's it going to work? It worked out mainly because they're three very complementary players, and Kevin Garnett is just a phenomenal defender, great passer, and Doc Rivers was okay. And it's just, you got to rely on, was it Billy Donovan to turn back the clock to this Florida days, and you got to rely on these three players all sacrificing a little bit, and you got to rely on Carmelo being better than he's shown. And it's just like too many questions. Really
and then I think I'm going to throw one more iffy thing in there is like, can you play Steven Adams and Andre Roberson together at crunch time? Because neither of them can shoot, neither of them can space the floor, and obviously you want Adams because of what he does on the defensive end and what he does as a defensive rebounder and what he does to defend the rim. So you start to ask yourself that question about Roberson, like teams are going to give him 5 feet when it comes to the offensive end. Like he's an awesome defender, and he's a guy you want playing defense, but when you're playing 4-on-5 and one of the 4 guys that you're counting on is Steven Adams, whose capability range is like 6 feet tops, I don't know, it just starts to like, there's really these interesting questions about Oklahoma City that I'm a little less sure that they're for sure in that we're competitive with the Warriors tier, and I'm a little bit more hesitant to say that at the moment, just because listen, I'll say this. I get the Carmelo trade, and I get that you turned Enes Kanter, who couldn't play in the playoffs, and Doug McDermott, who is meh, into Carmelo Anthony, and that's great. And it's not that they were great players, but there's almost a part of me that says that this team was better with Russell Westbrook and Paul George than it was with Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Carmelo Anthony because of the dynamics that it creates offensively.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That is my exact line of thinking when the trade went down is like, okay, good use of assets, but was it? Like, we'll see. We will see. But I do think this team focused on, maybe Carmelo's just going to slowly blend into the background and become like a phenomenal defender and, space the floor, yada, 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 fourth quarter scorer. But, I'm right there.
I think you making the Celtics analogy with Pierce, Garnett, and Allen, if Carmelo Anthony becomes the Ray Allen of this group, if he's the guy who takes fewer touches and becomes really efficient, then you have a formula where it was like, okay, that was a great thing. But if he would rather be the Paul Pierce and make Paul George be the Ray Allen, I'm not making the positional analogy. I'm making the involvement analogy, because Ray Allen really took a hit on terms of like his scoring, his touches, all that. He sacrificed all that to make a great team, and ultimately, that's probably why Ray Allen left town to go play in Miami. But that's here nor there. But you want Carmelo to be that guy, but you kind of feel like it will be Paul George because he's so multi-talented, because he can do so many things. And you don't want Paul George to take a back seat and let it be the Russell and Carmelo show on offense. But you kind of feel like that might be the direction that it takes when it comes to like
that's what it looks
assertiveness
like.
On offense, which I don't know. That's kind of scary to me.
It's not. I'm just so glad I'm not a Thunder fan, because there has to be like so many ups and downs for them right now, and it is like Paul George is the most versatile player on that team, at least the most versatile star. and it's so easy to see him being like, yeah, no, my game fits this. I can plug the gaps, but like you really want him. You want to give him Carmelo's attitude, and you want to give Carmelo Paul George's.
Yeah, and you want him just to fill it in differently. And I don't know, I think that's one of the most like super interesting teams to watch for the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season, because they don't have a sense of identity yet, and finding that sense of identity is going to be so crucial to them being competitive with the Warriors that it's really interesting how that might shake out.
Mm-hmm. It's a great year to have League Pass, I will say.
For sure. Like, this is the best year for it, because that was actually getting ready to lead me to my next question. So we've sort of gone over the games tonight, and a little bit more of an open floor plan question here is, what teams are you really excited about watching, whether it's like train wreck teams or teams that you think are going to be really compelling or particular players? Like, what teams do you really want to get locked in on this early in the season?
Besides the aforementioned teams, I think all of those teams will be very fascinating to follow throughout the season. I'm excited to follow the Nuggets and also the Pelicans, mainly because I can't wait for that to implode and then the trade rumors start, and it's juicy as a Celtics fan, but as a basketball fan too, if the Twin Towers can work it out, I'm very interested in that. And if the Nuggets start playing their ridiculous brand of basketball, I don't want to miss it. That's popcorn stuff for me.
So I wrote a piece, plug time. I wrote a piece for 94 Feet Report that's up today about passing centers, and in it I talked about Nikola Jokic quite a bit, and the impact that he has on the game, sort of as the Nuggets' best player, and this evolutionary center who's very reminiscent of a guy like Bill Walton. But in that, I spent a lot of time watching the Nuggets, and I know that Gary Harris has been really popular among hoops heads, like NBA Twitter sphere guys, but I don't think a lot of people know Gary Harris. And the more I watched him, the more I saw this player who I really, really love. He's the ideal running mate for Jokic, because he's the smartest cutter in the game. Like, he knows where to be and when to be there, and he knows when to sort of revolve around the 3-point line. And I think that this year is going to be a real coming out party for Gary Harris in terms of the national zeitgeist of basketball. Like, people are going to see it, and Gary Harris is going to become somebody that they're aware of, because he is a player who puts himself in the right position all the time. And I really think he's a 20-point-a-game scorer this year, which may be crazy, but listen, that's what I'm going to say.
I think, I mean, initial reaction like, oh my God, Gary Harris, 20-point scorer. But, I mean, he's playing with the right guy to make it happen. His passing is mind-bogglingly awesome. It's so fun to watch. Like, honestly, you could give me Jokic and like a team full of animated ham sandwiches, and I would watch that. Like, that would be so fun.
He is a guy who knows his role and he fills it so well, but he also has the rest of the team sort of trained, because you know how you talk about that, like, great passing is contagious. I'm watching film and I'm going through these plays and I'm really watching things. And one of the things that I noticed was all the time, 4 sets of eyes were on Jokic. That when he had the ball, everybody was aware that he had the ball and that the ball could come to them. You know, so you'd see Millsap sort of lingering in the low block, waiting for a guy to turn his head, or you'd see Gary Harris get ready to make a UCLA cut. And all the time that Jokic has the ball, whether he's dribbling, whether he's in like a dribble handoff, which they're so fond of doing, 4 sets of eyes are on Nikola Jokic, because he does deliver the ball to you in the exact right spot, which is a phenomenal asset to have as a center. And to me, alleviates one of the questions of like, well, the Nuggets don't have a distributing point guard. Well, they do. It's just Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
So I'm.
Yeah, it's the. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna add the same thing. Basically, it's like Jokic is just so transcendent as a passer that he forces everyone to be like, you're an NBA basketball player, you're a professional, you're involved in the game, but you're not just going through the motions, because every motion you make could make you look A, great because Jokic is passing you the ball, or B, really, really stupid if the ball bounced off your face. So He does. He makes the entire team better just by being himself.
And I think that you hit on this point of like awareness, that everybody's aware of what's going on in the game and nobody wants to get hit in the face with the ball. But watch the difference in a Carmelo Anthony possession where Carmelo gets the ball in the low block. Like, watch what happens with the rest of the members of the Thunder versus watch what happens when Nikola Jokic gets the ball in the low block. How the difference in attention that is paid to those players is ridiculous, and how much their offensive game like goes into watching Jokic and being available for Jokic and making cuts off Jokic versus a player who's like ball dominant like Carmelo. And I'm not trying to crucify him at all. I'm just putting him out there as I happen to watch Denver and Oklahoma City and seeing that stark contrast in the way that teammates paid attention is pretty frank. I mean, and there's no comparison beyond that. That's just it. Like, just watch how people pay attention to those two guys differently.
Your mind goes from thinking about offense to thinking about, well, how do I position to get this rebound, or where do I got to be running back? When do I have to run back on defense? It's very night and day.
Yeah, and Jokic just keeps people locked in, which is something that I'm very keen on. And then the other team you touched on, very interesting to me, is the New Orleans Pelicans. Like you said, like, what's the last... let me ask you a question. What's the last great NBA experiment? I mean, I guess I said it earlier in the podcast. I guess it's Daryl Morey. But, like, in terms of personnel, outside of Chris Paul and James Harden, I can't remember the last time that an experiment like this went down where you were like, well, these two guys don't really fit together, but they're both good players bordering on superstar players. Can you remember a time like that happening?
I'm thinking about it. I can't really. I mean, the Celtics trade is the last one I can think of, and I guess also like Chris Bosh, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade. But I mean, nothing's on the level of Morey's experiment or the Pelicans just jamming two centers together.
Like, these two dudes literally play the same position.
Yeah.
It's not like a two and a three.
It's not like they play a complementary.
Yeah. They both play the same
two centers.
Yeah, they both play the same position, and I don't know, it's weird. I can't remember this happening ever before.
It's just when it went down, I was like, what? And I'm still very much what? Like, even if you think about it, you can see the logic. It's like, well, we got to do something to make sure Anthony Davis sticks around, so we got to acquire a player. And it's like, if you think about it abstract, you're like, okay, smart move. But then, like, each step you come closer to reality from abstractness, it's like, what the hell are you thinking? Like, how is this? How?
And then to take that even a step further, like, it's not like they went out and did a Daryl Morey and built the perfect beast for James Harden. They just, the rest of their roster feels like a hodgepodge of just like, this is a player that we have, here's Rajon Rondo, he gets assists. Here's each one more. He's apparently a shooting guard now. I don't know. When I look at that roster, I just see maybe there was a scenario where this worked out, but with the personnel that they have right now, I don't see that at all. And I start to think, like, as loaded as the Western Conference is in, they could go into a free fall pretty quickly if this doesn't get sorted out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only is it a weird fit basketball-wise, it's a combustible fit with just any team with DeMarcus Cousins on it. You never know what's going to happen. And the tailspin could be very real, and I don't want to miss it if I leave.
No, definitely. And there are 11 playoff teams in the West right now. If you say Golden State, in no particular order, but if you say Golden State, San Antonio, Houston, Oklahoma City, Denver, the LA Clippers, Minnesota, Portland, Utah, New Orleans, and maybe Memphis. And obviously there are 8 playoff spots, so they're not 11 playoff teams. But the bottom of the league, particularly in the like Clippers, Denver, Minnesota, Portland, Utah, New Orleans, Memphis range, is going to be a very volatile area to be in. Like, I can imagine that there are going to be maybe 5 or 6 wins that separate the 5 seed from the 11 seed.
It's going to be ugly.
Which is... I don't know, if you lose a couple of games here and there and DeMarcus Cousins doesn't buy in, and boy, that could go really bad in a hurry for them.
Yeah, it's a fight down there at the bottom of the Western Conference, and I think as a fan, I love it. Like, meaningful basketball in the regular season is great to me. I yearn for the days of the old MLB 100 and some odd games, like where the pennant actually matters, and like it feels like the pennant matters this year. Like, especially in the West, like good teams are going to miss the playoffs, and it's going to be a fight.
Yeah,
a fight for the playoffs.
And I think that, like, I'm going to jump off of that and go a little bit of a different direction than, and just sort of away from New Orleans, but I feel like the Northwest is the best division in basketball, and that there are possibly 5 playoff teams in the Northwest. The Northwest division is Denver, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Portland, and Utah. Like, all 5 of those teams are legitimate teams that can compete for the playoffs. And I can imagine down the stretch that all of a sudden these Portland, Utah games and these Oklahoma City, Minnesota, and these Denver, Oklahoma City games get chippy because these teams see each other a lot, but they also carry like double weight because you're competing against, you obviously want to win the division, but you're also competing against the people who are in the same position in the conference as you.
Yeah. We're going to be seeing playoff basketball like at least a month before the actual playoffs out there. It's really awesome.
I can't remember. I mean, it's obviously happened before, and I think like 2015 was like that. That was the year, whatever the year that the Phoenix, like the 45-win Phoenix team missed the playoffs.
Right. Yeah.
I think we're gonna be seeing one of those of like, maybe it's the number to miss the playoffs, the cutoff to miss the playoffs is not going to be quite as high. Maybe a 44-win team gets in, maybe a 45-win team gets in, and probably more likely like a 43-win team gets left out, which I know we're talking about degrees of variance that are very small there, but these games with Denver, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Portland, and Utah, those are going to be bloodbaths for all of March and April.
Yeah, it's not going to be so much the win totals like you're saying. It's the just the talent level, and from top to bottom, at least in terms of playoff picture, I can't remember a more stacked conference.
Yeah, and a stacked division, and so
division.
So let's like go through this kind of quickly and talk about like the teams that aren't competitive for a playoff spot in the Western Conference. And see if you agree with my list. I've got 4 teams on this list. It's Dallas, the Lakers, Sacramento, and Phoenix. Do you agree that there's probably, if you had to parlay bet on these, those are the 4 teams you say 100% chance miss the playoffs? I mean, can you talk yourself into any of those 4?
I mean, no. I could try, but it wouldn't work.
Okay.
I mean, Dirk Nowitzki could take like a super serum, and maybe then I could talk myself into it.
Are you saying like 06 Dirk? Like they get a time machine and they get 06 Dirk back?
Say you get 06 Dirk back, and also give him like the ghost of Michael Jordan's great years, like coaching him while he's playing.
Okay.
I think that's the situation that I would need to.
Let me throw one more thing in there. What if Dennis Smith is Steve Francis? Does that help?
I think it does not.
Okay, no. all right. So that's my 4. Those are my 4 teams that like I'm just like, about in the Western Conference. If I had to take a bet, now when you flip over to the Eastern Conference, I think there are 5 teams that I can 100% rule out of the playoffs, and those 5 teams are the New York Knicks, Orlando, Indiana, Atlanta, and Chicago, and. Yep. I'm kind of teetering on the edge with Brooklyn. Like I hear the argument, and I hear that Brooklyn's going to be bad, but I also look at that roster and go like, yeah, but are they that bad?
Yeah, the thing that most, in fact, I would say 99.9% of basketball fans don't realize is that the Nets came on strong at the end of last season. And yeah, sure, people are resting. The games don't really matter. You're playing the Nets, yada, yada, yada. But as a Celtics fan, you saw that Nets team coming together, and you got legit scared at the end of last season. I thought we weren't going to get that pick. They started to turn into a team, and now they have the players, I would say, to be even better. I mean, I'm not giving them a playoff spot, but I think saying that they're not 100% to miss is correct. As crazy as it sounds, they aren't 100% to miss.
I kind of paint it like this: like, okay, New York has their own pick. They're incentivized to lose. Orlando, Indiana, Atlanta, Chicago. These are teams that are incentivized to lose, and there are quite a lot of them. So you have 5 teams in the Eastern Conference, and then probably we'll say 3 teams in the Western Conference that are dedicated to tanking. Now, 8 teams that are dedicated to tanking this year makes the idea that Brooklyn doesn't control their pick this year and has no incentive to lose and really, really wants to develop D'Angelo Russell and maybe buy out a guy or look for a trade. I've talked about this before, but like I kind of think that the ideal situation for Philadelphia would be to deal Jahlil Okafor to Brooklyn to get back a rotation piece, whatever it is they need if they want to go playoff hunting. Because I don't think the market's going to be very high for Jahlil Okafor, but I kind of think he might be Reclamation Project 2.0 for Brooklyn. And moves like that and not controlling your own pick and looking for young talent that you can develop that's maybe in a bad situation puts me in this mindset that there's no reason for Brooklyn to want to lose, and because there are 8 to 9 teams that do want to lose, that Brooklyn's going to be in that 32, 33, 34 win range, whereas some of these other teams are going to be in the low 20s or high 30s.
Yep, it's not too much of a stretch from there to imagine, like, well, say they do buy out that guy, say they do get Jahlil Okafor, like, it doesn't. It's not likely. I'm not trying to say it is, but it doesn't take much imagination to see them in the battle for that 8th spot.
Yeah,
which is it's crazy, but that's the world we're living in right now. I would say.
I'm not sure what their asset pool is like very deep beyond guys like Alan Crabb and Damari Carroll and Timofey Mozgov, who you can say a lot of things, but like. Those Damari Carroll, if he has a good season this year, might bait somebody into thinking, "Hey, there's our wing player. There's a wing rotation player for the playoffs." You know, a team like Philadelphia or a team like Miami may buy into that. And if Brooklyn can turn one of those pieces into a halfway young, decent asset, I think that they'll have a good season, and then letting Jeremy Lin and D'Angelo Russell do their work and letting Russell develop can be a really big thing for the Brooklyn Nets this year. And maybe that's all just wishful thinking.
Yeah, it is all just wishful thinking, but it's not crazy thinking. It's like, I think you'd have to get into crazy thinking to imagine any of those other teams in the East doing a move that makes them better this year. Like, the argument that, like, if you take, like, a bunch of teams that are basically, we'll just say for the sake of argument, equal in talent, the one that doesn't have incentive to lose, invariably, it's just going to rise to the top just by not wanting to be at the bottom.
Yeah, and if they can, I'm looking at this list right now, and I'm thinking, like, there are 4 or 5 teams who might be willing to take on a Jeremy Lin, or, you know, like, okay, here, this is a scenario I totally just made up in my head, but we're going to go with it for a second. Yeah. Milwaukee is a team that sort of lacks point guard play. They could do with a point guard like Jeremy Lin. Mm-hmm. If they can get a Jeremy Lin for a first that's going to end up in the bottom 10, I mean, that's probably not a great use of the first, but it also could put them over the hump in an Eastern Conference that's pretty anemic. You know, so it's a move like that. It's a coach who's a little bit afraid for his job. It's a team who's a little bit more desperate to go to the second round of the playoffs. It takes a little bit of desperation, but if a player like Jeremy Lin or Damari Carroll or Alan Crabb or Timofey Mozgov starts to look appealing, the Nets can leverage that into something that can be really important to a franchise that is not compelled to lose this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're in that spot where you don't want to be counting them on. I would not want to bet on them being bad, like horrible. They've got all the minutes in the world to throw at people they think might be good trade chips. So it's not crazy. This is not a crazy conversation. It may sound crazy, but it's not. It's really not.
And again, mark the tape if you're listening out there, so you can when the Nets win 19 games, you can come let us know that we said this, and that Cleveland picks first in the draft and all that stuff. Just let us know.
Just let us know. I mean, we live for that stuff. We live for being wrong.
All right. So there's one more thing I want to ask you about, and it just a jumping off thing on that Nets pick. And then we'll quit. I promise. You don't have to listen to us anymore. There's one more thing I want to ask you about, and that is, do you see a scenario where Cleveland might dangle that trade piece, that Brooklyn pick, as a trade piece to land LeBron some more help without his commitment to staying? I mean, like, obviously that sounds crazy, but I think a lot of destinations, like LA, just does not look like a particularly compelling destination if you're LeBron right now. And
Yeah.
maybe you do it sight unseen. Obviously, if he would commit to it, which he would never do, you would be willing to trade that piece. But do you see another scenario where they're willing to part with something that can be so valuable to their franchise in the post-LeBron era?
I think the only scenario in my mind that's popping up would be if it gives them, if it moves their needle excessively towards winning a chip this year. And if they were to do that, to give them a piece that allows them to win a championship this year or be very competitive for one, and then also maybe for the next year or so, I think they do that sight unseen. Just because what you said, like there's not many destinations out there that look appealing to LeBron, and if LeBron feels like he has a legitimate shot at a title in the next couple of years, I don't see any reason whatsoever he would leave. But the Cleveland Cavaliers, they did turn down, what was that Paul George trade because LeBron wouldn't extend.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I don't know how trigger happy they're going to be with it, but I mean, I guess Paul George wasn't on. He's a free agent next year, so it really depends on the asset. But like if they get Anthony Davis, like, does that make LeBron stay? I think so.
That was actually going to be the name. I was getting ready to say, like, if you had to throw two names out there, the names that are compelling enough to make you move are, okay, I'll throw one more name in there. But the two names that I thought of immediately right off the bat were Anthony Davis. That's interesting, obviously. He's one of the best under 25 players in the league, and a dude who would just thrive playing with LeBron. Okay, and then the other guy is his current running mate, DeMarcus Cousins. That sort of seems kind of interesting and compelling. And then the third name I'll throw in there, which is definitely not as exciting, but could be really interesting, is a guy like Mike Conley. Like, Mike Conley's playing on a bad Memphis Grizzlies team. If they win 39 games, they might decide that they're going to go into the tank and start to look to rebuild. And dealing Mike Conley, I mean, I don't know what the salary implications are for dealing any of these guys. It's not something I've researched or even looked at, but you need a very high caliber player to be available to start to entertain this situation, I think.
Yeah, very much so. And I think Conley's actually a pretty interesting sleeper suggestion for the Cavs. Like LeBron playing with Conley, I like that 1-2 right there. That would be interesting. I don't know if that makes LeBron stay. I mean, it might if it makes them better, obviously, but that's something I hadn't thought of. Conley would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought of it, and like obviously he signed the big contract. He's the $100 million man, and there are a million reasons why it wouldn't work under the CBA, and you guys can all at me on all that yada. But he's an Ohio State guy. He played with LeBron years ago in AAU or in high school or wherever that was that he played with him, and he's also a very good player who's pretty underrated in terms of what he brings to the game and can switch on defense. He's a very capable defender. That could be a really interesting fit that'll never happen because it's a thing I just made up.
Yeah.
But if we were talking about like 2K,
Yeah, definitely 2K. That'd be interesting. Conley's come a long way since being second fiddle to Greg Oden.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, Conley is sort of inarguably the best player off of those teams that played in the title game.
Yeah.
It's
kind of crazy.
Which is, we thought that number one pick Greg Oden was hands down going to be that player, but boy, Mike Conley's really come on.
Yeah, you could have won a lot of money betting on Mike Conley over Greg Oden.
Where would you even bet on that?
I think those like the deep web where you make all the big money and the big bets.
Oh,
you
okay. I want to get in on that.
I'll let you know after the podcast.
Okay, that's some off-air stuff right there. All right. Well, do you have anything else to put in on this? I mean, I feel like as organic discussions go, that felt pretty good. Like we just went through everything and we talked about all the interesting stuff, and that's it.
I feel like we hit all the bases accidentally and also very well. Pat ourselves on the back.
We did. Oh, good job. Good job.
It
All
does.
right, well, I'll let you go because I know that you have to spend at least the next 5 hours mentally preparing for the game tonight.
Yep, I'm going to need all sorts of chakras to align. I've got a sweat bath at a sweat lodge coming up. It's a real in-depth process. I'm actually running behind.
Okay, I'll let you go. The last thing I'll tell you is in our Slack for 94 Feet Report, I told everybody the Celtics were going to go 96 and negative 14. So I'm sticking to that. Celtics 96 and negative 14 this year, and
It's a good line.
that's it. That's what I'm going with. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on. Always glad to have you, and always glad to just let it flow and talk about the NBA.
Anytime, my man.
All right, man. Well, I'll talk to you later.
I'll see you.
As always, thanks for listening to the podcast. It is an honor to do this. It is a pleasure to do this, and I have a lot of fun doing it. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at AlexWestNBA. Following the podcast at N1Analytics. Make sure you're following us on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, wherever it is you get your podcasts. And make sure to check out the 94 Feet Report for daily NBA updates. I work with some really great authors, some guys who are really beating the bushes to find great content. So check that out. And until next time, I'm your host, Alex West for the N1 Podcast. Good night.